All right, you can be opening your Bibles to 2 Chronicles. Second Chronicles chapter 20 is the prayer that we will be looking at. Usually I'm very responsible and I bring all my stuff, including my computer, to worship on Sunday. Just in case there's anything missing, I have everything, all my files, ready to go to print something, to load something up. But I've started to get a little overconfident and thinking, I know I have everything set up ahead of time. I know there's nothing missing, nothing is lacking. I don't need to bring my computer because I know it's all ready to go. And then Robert comes up a few minutes ago and said, "Do you have a PowerPoint for class?" It's on my computer back home. So no PowerPoint today, but we don't really need it, especially for this class, especially this far into this class on prayer. I think y'all understand the gist of what we're doing. As always, I hope that you do have some paper to write on, whether that's your journal that we provided, your own journal, or just a loose piece of paper will work too. We will spend some time in about 23 minutes in some journal and reflection, writing out some prayers to God based on this prayer that we're going to be talking about in 2 Chronicles 20. Okay, last week we talked about the prayer of Solomon. Thank you, Cecilia. Okay, let's just do a very brief kind of historical recap from Solomon to where we are here in 2 Chronicles 20. If you actually looked through the book of 2 Chronicles, at least for me, I'm much more familiar with the account that's given to us in Kings. I think that's kind of our go-to spot for the history of the united and the divided kingdom. But 2 Chronicles retells this same history, starting in chapter 1 with Solomon. And actually there's a version of the prayer we looked at last week in 2 Kings 3. There's a version of that in 1 Kings 3. There's a version of that in 2 Chronicles 1. Solomon builds the temple. That takes up several chapters in 2 Chronicles. And he was chosen by God. David had prepared the way for Solomon to build the temple. The purpose of the temple was to be God's dwelling place among his people. In fact, in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, when Solomon constructs the temple, if you feel like you can make it back to chapter 20, flip back a few pages to chapter 6 of 2 Chronicles. Solomon builds the temple and he dedicates it to God, right? And he says, "God, this is your dwelling place." It's kind of silly, right? Your heaven is your throne, the earth is your footstool. What dwelling place can hold you? And yet, God had wanted to dwell with his people. And so they build this temple, and God is going to dwell in this temple. And he notices in 2 Chronicles 6, it's one of those chapters that if you glance through, starting in 17 or 18 or so, and keep going through, you'll notice that there's this pattern that Solomon uses in his prayer of dedication to God when he basically says, if this horrible thing happens to us as your people, and yet we come to this temple and we pray to you, our God, please hear our prayers and forgive us and give us relief from our affliction, right? So just as one example of that, in verse 28 of 2 Chronicles 6, if there is famine in the land, if there is pestilence, if there's a blight or mildew, if there's locust or grasshopper, if their enemies besiege them in the land of their cities, whatever plague or whatever sickness there is, whatever prayer or supplication is made by any man or by all your people Israel, each knowing his own affliction and his own pain, and spreading his hands toward this house, then hear from heaven your dwelling place, and forgive and render to each according to all his ways, whose heart you know, for you alone know the hearts of the Son of Men, that they may fear you, to walk in your ways as long as they live in the land which you have given to our fathers. Okay, you see the idea. Solomon builds the temple, and God is going to be there, and he says, God, if people are experiencing these afflictions and they come to the temple and they cry out before you, you know their hearts, please hear their prayer and give them what they are asking for. Okay, Well, in chapter 7 of 2 Chronicles, you'll notice in verse 1 that after Solomon finishes praying, fire comes from heaven, consumes the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and it says that the glory of the Lord filled the house. Okay? And notice in that same chapter, 2 Chronicles 7 and verse 12, the Lord appeared to Solomon at night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. And he goes on to say, if I do these things, right, punishment for your sin, I will, verse 15, my eyes will be open, my ears will be attentive to the prayer offered in this place. So God basically tells Solomon, I will do what you've asked. In future generations, when people come and they humble themselves in my house and they pray to me in the midst of their afflictions, I will hear them, I will answer them, and I will be faithful to my people. My eyes will be open and my ears will be attentive to their prayer. Okay, that's going to be relevant in just a minute, okay? But back to the kind of history recap. Chapter 8 and 9 of 2 Chronicles describe the wisdom and the wealth of Solomon. Interesting, there's not much in 2 Chronicles about Solomon's downfall, about his wives or his idolatry. We read that, remember that from the king's account. But we do learn in chapter 10 of 2 Chronicles that the nation splits, right? And from chapter 10 of 2 Chronicles on, we have this divided kingdom, as we refer to it, where in Jerusalem and in Judea, in the southern part of Judah, you have the sons of David, starting with Rehoboam, sitting on the throne. And in the northern kingdom, we have kind of different people, starting with Jeroboam, who are ruling over Israel. And you remember that the time of the divided kingdom is a very dark time. Very little faithfulness to God, a lot of idolatry, a lot of wickedness. And every so often, a king will come along and will implement reforms. That really only ever happens in Judah. In Israel in the north, basically no one ever brings the people back to faithfulness. But in Jerusalem, every now and then you'll have a king that reforms and brings the people back to service to God as God had required in the law of Moses. And that is true of the king we're talking about this morning, King Jehoshaphat. Okay? Chapters 17 to 19 of 2 Chronicles tell us about the reign of Jehoshaphat, right? And you may have some headings in your Bible, like in chapter 17, that says Jehoshaphat's good reign. Okay? It says that he took great pride, verse 6, in the ways of the Lord, and again removed the high places in the Asherim, right? He's bringing the people back to, verse 9, the book of the law of the Lord, right? And he taught the book of the law of the Lord in the cities among the people, okay? Jehoshaphat's not a perfect king. Okay, you read it also in chapter 18 of 2 Chronicles. He had this propensity to make alliances with Ahab, the wicked king of Israel, and Ahab's sons. But yet, he is a reforming king on the whole. In chapter 19, starting in verse 5, describes some of those reforms that Jehoshaphat implements. Okay? And so, as a reward for the reforms that Jehoshaphat has made and the improvements, the faithfulness that he has shown in Judah, we learn in chapter 20 and verse 1 that after all of this, the sons of Moab and the sons of Ammon, together with some of the Meunites, came to make war against Jehoshaphat. Okay? Typically, we think of war being made on Israel or Judah as a punishment for the sins of the people. That's not always the way it works. We don't know all the mind of God has, right, for his people. But there are occasions like this one where a good reforming king, after he's made those reforms and turned the people's faithfulness to God, here comes a test, we might say. Here comes an attack of enemies against the people, right? And it may very well be, we can come back to this later if you want, it may very well be that's what's going on, that now that Jehoshaphat has turned the people's heart back to serving the law of God, the question is, will they really trust him when things get difficult and when the enemies are pressing in? So let's read the rest of this opening section here. It says in verse 2, so 2 Chronicles 20, that's where we ended up here. 2 Chronicles 20, In verse 2, it says, "Then some came and reported to Jehoshaphat, saying, A great multitude is coming against you from beyond the sea, out of Aram, and behold, they are in Hazazon Tamar," that is, in Gedi, "coming up from the south, from the southeast." Jehoshaphat was afraid, verse 3, and turned his attention to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. So Judah gathered together to seek help from the Lord. They even came from all the cities of Judah to seek the Lord. And here's the prayer that we're focusing on, starting in verse 5. So we'll read it, and I ask you what stands out to you. We can start a conversation about Jehoshaphat's prayer. Verse 5, 2 Chronicles 20. "Then Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of the Lord before the new court and said, O Lord, the God of our fathers, are you not God in the heavens? And are you not ruler over all the kingdoms of the nations? Power and might are in your hand, so that no one can stand against you. Did you not, O our God, drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel and give it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend, forever? They have lived in it, and you have built you a sanctuary there for your name, saying, Should evil come upon us, the sword or judgment or pestilence or famine, we will stand before this house and before you, for your name is in this house, and cry to you in our distress, and you will hear and deliver us. Now behold, the sons of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, whom you did not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt, they turned aside from them and did not destroy them. See how they are rewarding us by coming to drive us out from your possession, which you have given us as an inheritance." Verse 12, "O our God, will you not judge them? For we are powerless before this great multitude who are coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." Okay. Let's hear from you. I've done enough talking. What stands out to you in this prayer? What do you want to say that is remarkable about Jehoshaphat's prayer here in 2 Chronicles 20? Brian, kick us off.
Well, they declare and they recognize and declare to God that they know of His power and His might as compared to their utter weakness, that they therefore depend upon God.
Thank you, Brian. They know God's power as a contrast to their utter weakness. Thank you. What else would you say about Jehoshaphat's prayer? Albert?
Verses, I think our previous prayers have been private and to God, but this is a public-led prayer as I'm reading it, and then the context of how he's not. At first, I felt like he was challenging God. It's like, are you not? But I see that it was building to maybe the audience to build their strength and confidence and going, okay, yeah, this is the God. This is why we're here. This is why we're praying.
Thank you, Albert. Albert points out this is a public prayer, which, as he says, is different than many, if not all, of the prayers up to this point. That is a person leading a prayer before a congregation or an assembly of people. And Albert mentions the challenge that he offers God, and then that leading to confidence that he gives the people. Nick?
Well, you also have, in this case, it's a supplication to God, and since this is a public prayer and in front of the people, he's also reminding the people of the wonderful power of God and what God has done to get them to this place so far.
Thank you, Nick. The supplication serves as a reminder to the people of what God has done for them. Thank you. What else would you say stands out remarkably about 2 Chronicles 20? Let's go to Rick and then back to Brian.
I'm just glad to see a leader of the people leading the people in prayer publicly. And like Nick said, there's a dual-fold purpose here. He is reminding the people of everything that's been said as he's making his supplication to God. But the fact that the leader is standing up, speaking eloquently, setting an example, and then saying, we don't know what to do, we're relying on you. It's very powerful.
Thank you, Rick. Brian?
Yeah, I find it interesting. I don't know whether he's reminding the people, but it sounds like they're in their prayer reminding God of Solomon's prayer and his promise to answer that prayer in a time of affliction.
Thank you, Brian. A reminder of God's promise that we saw back earlier in 2 Chronicles related to Solomon's prayer. That was you, Albert? Yeah, keep it coming, man.
Here I go with words. Specificity of who the enemy was. It was like specific and distinct, and what the issue was, what the challenge was. And so I know personally I kind of get vague in my prayers and be with us and give us strength, but there's times where I need to be more focused and detailed about what is challenging me and or on behalf of the congregation when I'm praying on their behalf.
Thank you, Albert. I'm laughing in my head. Not to dishonor the name of my late grandfather, but my parents dug out their old wedding audio recording years ago. We listened to it as kids. It was kind of funny, you know. And my granddad led the prayer at the wedding, you know, and he kept saying in his prayer, like, please be with these young people as they enter into this. It's like, it's your own kids. You can't even say Marty and Mary. Like, come on, you know. But there's something powerful about being more I do the same thing. We have a tendency, for whatever reason, to be vague in our requests or in our addressing God, as opposed to a very personal way of just speaking about what it is that we're asking about, right? Tell him what's going on. He knows, by the way, who's getting married and who the enemies are. So go ahead and tell him specifically. Alex?
Only thing that kind of stood out to me was, it's been said, it's like where he's saying, are you not the God of heaven? Are you not the ruler? Are you not ruler over all the kingdoms? All these, are you not? And then, I don't know if he's trying to connect this, but he says, will you not judge them? And I don't know, it just kind of stood out to me a little bit.
Well, thank you, Alex. Connection between the language of, are you not, verse 6, the God in the heavens? Did you not, verse 7, drive out the inhabitants? And then verse 12, our God, will you not judge them? Okay. So let's go off from there, and I'll share a few things, kind of just tying together the things that have already been said before we move into our time for journaling and reflection. I do think, to Alex's point, and several of you have picked up on this, that Jehoshaphat is intentionally framing the praise of God in a way that also sets up the complaint against God, if you will. And I use that word complaint in kind of in the context of the biblical prayers like the Psalms. That's what they're doing. They're offering a supplication, a complaint to say, God, what's going on? And I don't know if you have ever felt this in your prayers, right? There's something that's really weighing on you, something you're struggling with, and you start your prayer to God and you're praising God. God, you're the creator. You're the God who made our bodies. You know us and how our bodies work. You love us. And as you're praying those are praises of God. As you're praising God, you're thinking, so God, if you're really all those things, why are you not doing for me what it is that I want you to do, right? You see that there's the praise leads to the question, right? The complaint. And you see that in the way that Jehoshaphat frames his prayers. God, are you not the all-powerful God? Okay. Are you not the God that drove out the enemies? So why will you not do something about this? Right? And I agree wholeheartedly with the comments that were made to say that in the end, Jehoshaphat, this is clearly a prayer of great confidence in God. Okay, he is not doubting God, right? But he is simply calling on God to say, God, we know this is who you are, so will you not act on behalf of your people? And not only is Jehoshaphat connecting the dots of God's nature, God's power, God's justice to, hey, the present situation, do something about this. As you guys also mentioned, there is a great understanding and articulation of history in this prayer. Let's try to make a quick list. We've already mentioned several of them, but let's just kind of shotgun them out here. What are all the different historical events that Jehoshaphat refers to in this prayer, either explicitly or implicitly? The promise of the land. Thank you, Denise. Thank you. Thank you, Granny. So the offending nations here, Edom and Moab in particular, remember back in the wandering of the wilderness, okay? God said, don't invade Moab and Edom because they're from Lot, going back through Abraham's family. Leave them alone, okay? Jehoshaphat refers to that historical event in the prayer to say, and now look what they're doing. We spared them, and now they're attacking us. Okay, will you not judge them? So we have the promised Abraham. We have the Edomites and the Moabites. What other historical events are referred to in Jehoshaphat's prayer? The period of the judges. Okay, what else? The building of the temple and Solomon's prayer. What else? Thank you. Anything else? Maybe we did get all of them here. But you notice, right? I mean, put all that together. You're talking about promise to Abraham, the time of Moses, okay, the time of Solomon. You're talking about centuries worth of history that Jehoshaphat is calling back on. And again, what's the purpose of calling on all that history? What's he doing in the prayer? Yeah, thank you, Dan. Reminding God, and again, excellent, I think, insights that were offered. That as a public prayer, there is a twofold purpose here, okay? And that the reminders are for the people as much as anything. But I do think, and we've seen this already with the prayers of Moses in particular, okay? We've seen this in prayer where you say, God, this is what you have done. Now continue to do what you've always done, right? What are you banking on in prayer? Right? That God's in a good mood, right? No, you're banking on the fact that God is faithful. And we say, God, this is what you've done. This is who you are. And so we are calling on that. That is our confidence to say, please hear us again and answer this prayer, right? In a similar way, we could talk about the promises that he refers to. He refers to promises to Abraham, promises to Solomon, right? And for Jehoshaphat, the promises are reality. The promises are an assurance that when he calls out to God, God will hear and God will answer. And then finally, one other thing that was already mentioned. In fact, Michael kind of set us up for this with his comment about that final song. I am weak, but thou art strong. This last verse, I mean, it's just amazing. This is a verse to maybe put on a sticky note, right? To keep before our eyes at all times. We are powerless before this great multitude who are coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Okay. We've already mentioned, maybe we'll get back to it this morning, but remember Paul's prayer in 2 Corinthians, whatever it is, 10 or 11, the thorn in the flesh, asking it for to be removed. God would not remove the thorn in the flesh until Paul realizes, in my weakness, I'm made strong. This is when we're at our strongest. This is when we are most confident, when we are just like, I don't know what to do. Right? I'm utterly powerless, as Brian said, but our eyes are on God. Okay. And there's a real, genuine humility in this that I'm often lacking in prayer. This phrase, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. So often in prayer, it's like I have figured out the best plan for what needs to happen, and I'm basically just asking God to like rubber stamp the plan that I've come up with, right? God, please do this and this and this and this and this, because this is exactly what needs to happen, right, according to my wisdom, okay? And so please go through my checklist and answer what I'm at. Jehoshaphat says, I have no idea what to do, right? But I'm looking to you, because you're a faithful God. You're a God that's made these promises. We count on that, and we trust in you. Right? That's, I think, the power of Jehoshaphat's prayer. And God answers. We won't read all of this, but this is the story. You may remember I preached a sermon about this a couple years ago, and it was a new story for me that I didn't even realize. I think they added it in my Bible between the time I was growing up and a couple years ago. But this is the great story where they don't even end up fighting this battle. Okay? Notice what happens in verse 15, right? It says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon, verse 14, this Levite, and says, listen, all the inhabitants of Jerusalem and King Jehoshaphat, thus says the Lord to you, do not fear or be dismayed, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Right? So the answer to the prayer is, the battle belongs to the Lord, basically. So, go down, verse 16, against them. Verse 17, you need not fight this battle. Station yourselves. Stand and see the salvation of the Lord on your behalf. O Judah and Jerusalem, do not fear or be dismayed. Tomorrow go out to face them, for the Lord is with you. By the way, these are echoes of the great stories of the past, right? When God told Moses, right? at the Red Sea. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. All you have to do is, as one person said, shut up and let God be God, right? All you have to do is stand by and be silent. Or you heard the echoes of Joshua 1. God told Joshua, be strong, be of great good courage. Do not fear or be dismayed, for I am with you. So, verse 18, Jehoshaphat bowed his head, his face to the ground, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem fell down before the Lord, worshiping. Okay. Notice in verse 20, Jehoshaphat stood and said to the people, O Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, put your trust in the Lord your God, and you will be established. Put your trust in his prophets and succeed. See the idea, right? When he says our eyes are on you in prayer, he means that. And so the follow-up to that is to say, God, whatever you say through your prophets, I'm willing to listen. You give instructions and we'll obey them. That's what it means to say, we don't know what to do, our eyes are on you. Okay? And what he is told to do, or what he ends up doing in verse 21, is putting the singers out on the front line. The singers sing, give thanks to the Lord, for his loving kindness is everlasting. In verse 22, when they begin singing and praising, there are ambushes, and the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Edomites all start attacking each other, and literally the Israelites don't even raise a sword against their enemies. They walk out in the battlefield and find corpses because they've all killed each other already, and it takes them 3 days to gather up all the spoils from their enemies and bring it back to Jerusalem. That's the answer to Jehoshaphat's prayer that we have talked about. Okay, so get out the paper that you're going to journal on. And like I said, we'll spend a few minutes doing this together. Doing it individually. We'll all sit here together doing it individually. And I want you to think for yourself, based on the story in 2 Chronicles 20, what is it that you are afraid of? That was the response of Jehoshaphat in verse 3. He was afraid because of the enemies that were pressing in on him. What are we afraid of? Like Jehoshaphat, think through, what has God said? What has God done? What do you know about God's promises? What do you know about his nature? What do you know about the history of God's dealings with his people? What has God said? What has God done? And how can you in your own prayer express from your heart the same prayer of Jehoshaphat? We don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Take about 10 minutes to journal quietly, and we'll, after that, end the class in some discussion. All right. Got about 8 minutes left. So as we've been doing, let's spend the next few minutes in discussion amongst yourselves. Again, the question is not what did you write down. The question is how does the story of Jehoshaphat help us with our prayers? What have you learned about that in our reflections today? So talk amongst yourselves how the story of Jehoshaphat helps us with our prayers. And then if we have time, we'll share out to the class before class is over. Talk amongst yourselves. All right, we have about 3 or 4 minutes before the second bell rings. So what do you want to share from your discussions? How does the prayer of Jehoshaphat help us with our prayers? What did y'all talk about? Go ahead, Brian.
Mom was talking about yielding to God, to submitting to God in the prayer, recognizing our weaknesses and our reliance upon his strength. For me, I was thinking, oftentimes I will do what they did here, reminding God of his promises, which seems silly. I'm going to remind God of what he authored and knows intimately far better than I do, but I think it's more of a sense of telling God, not so much that we're reminding him of his promises, but how much I am relying upon his promises to deliver me from the whatever it is I'm dealing with. And then I guess finally I would just say, this is maybe a product of old age, but you ask, what is it that you fear? I find that the fears of my youth are long gone. I know afflictions come and they hurt when they do, but my fear is not of future afflictions that could come our way physically. It's the spiritual battle that I'm engaged in in the last few remaining years I have in this life, I want them to be my best. And I fear the wounds that sin can afflict on me. And I'm not perfect as Christ is. Sin still enters into my life, and I hate it. And therefore I pray for strength and help, as they pray for strength and help here, only it's in the spiritual battle, not the physical battle.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? A couple minutes left here. What did you learn from Jehoshaphat's prayer, Rick?
A lot of good thoughts there. I was struck by the coupling of making the prayer, and then right after that, as they are going into battle, singing and praising God, going to kind of reinforce the prayer. And then the back end of that, after God delivers them without raising a sword, like you said, the rejoicing and the joy that takes place. And I'm struck by how much time they took to do that. Again, with Jehoshaphat leading that effort, the leader out in front saying, we're going to praise and rejoice God on the way in to support what we just prayed for, and then to rejoice after God answered our prayers.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. That comment brings to mind, you could do this whole other study, or maybe we had 10 more minutes each class, kind of like, well, what happens after the prayer, okay? And so, for instance, right, after Hannah prays her prayer of asking for this child and then praising God for the child, she follows through and dedicates that child to the Lord, right? After David prays for forgiveness, he goes to the threshing floor of Arnon and says, I'm not going to offer a sacrifice so that doesn't cost me anything, and he pays the money to offer that sacrifice. Solomon says, I want wisdom. What do we do after that? Well, Solomon's maybe a little bit of a mixed bag. You pray for wisdom, then you seek God's wisdom and you trust in it. Same thing here. If we're going to pray, God, I don't know what to do, our eyes are on you, what do you do after you get up from that prayer? Well, you put your eyes on the Lord. You sing to Him, you praise Him, you worship Him, and you trust in His prophets and the word that He's given to you, and follow His instructions. So that's the story of Jehoshaphat. David's picking up next week, as I'll be in California, and in the words of Jehoshaphat, he does not know what to do. So he'll figure out what lesson he's teaching before Sunday, and you guys will benefit greatly from. That was a joke, by the way, I guess. One person maybe laughed. All right. See y'all in a couple weeks.